This is the fantasy episode, this one.
It is, yes.
We now have a full list of the Kings of War Uncharted Empire's armies has been announced. So what are we looking at here?
Yeah, so this was a little bit of a Q&A that Man did, the new Uncharted Empires book with Man weeks past, where Jerry sat down with the guys, Rob and stuff, to go through the game and that kind of thing. And this is the book that's going to allow you to play a whole bunch of different armies and themes for armies that don't quite fit into the kind of main selection of offerings for the world of Panathor and Kings of War. So in here, I believe there's going to be 12 new sort of lists, I guess you'd say. So you've got the Brotherhood, who are then split down into the Order of the Brother Mark and the Order of the Green Lady. You've got Free Dwarves, Salamanders, Sylvan Kin, the Herd, so think Beastmen, Kingdom of Men, the League of Rhodia, which also includes some of the Halflings, which people were upset seem to have disappeared. You've got the Ratkin, the Ratkin Slaves, which we can see a preview for some of the down below that, and also the Twilight Kin and the Varangar as well. So, as I said, and I'm sure Jerry can go into it in a little bit more detail, this will allow you to have a whole bunch of sort of like master lists for a bunch of the different factions in here, but then there's also going to be some themes that will then be applied to some of the existing factions to give them a little bit more of a sort of like a unique and interesting flair. But one of the key things I think is really cool about this is that we're starting to see the guys at Mantic really sort of taking the idea of, hey, here sitting there sort of gathering dust and that kind of thing. But what we're seeing them do with some of their sort of separate model releases, like you can see for the Ratkin there, and also some of the artwork, like the stuff that you see on the front book, is they're kind of giving it a little bit more of that Panathor Kings of War feel. So they're taking a lot of these armies and going, hey, this is what it would be like if it was in Panathor, which I think is really cool. So obviously on the front cover, you've got the Bretonnians, I'm going to say, against some lizard men, which kind of gives you echoes of Warhammer Fantasy Past and stuff. But it's nice to see them doing stuff that is sort of like wholly Mantic about this thing.
Is this the book that I need to get a list for my Russ from?
Yes. This is it. So the first time we seen Uncharted Empires, they were just about to release second edition when the whole world got exploded. And there were an awful lot of people with fantasy armies that weren't interested in Sigmar. So they kind of rushed to get Uncharted Empires out that contained composite versions. So you had a Bretonnian-esque list, a Skaven-esque list, a Lizardman-esque list, and so on and so forth. And then a couple of other lists at the end that were solely Mantic. So Trident Realms, so Fishmen, and Night Stalkers, so literally elf nightmares made real. This time round, they've had more time, so those lists were very rushed. They had like two to 3 months between concept and printing to get the book out. They took all the lists they had, split them. The ones that Mantic made the third edition rulebook.
Yes.
So that's Mantic, that's their core. But not wanting to leave any of the lists that existed behind, they've gone into Uncharted Empires, and the master lists and theme lists are interesting because that came over from Kings of War Historic, where you had essentially the master list was just all the human things ever. So if you can think of a human thing that has fought between biblical times and Napoleonics, it had a version in that master list. So spearmen, pikemen, bowmen, light archers, Mongol warriors, chariots, all of that. And then they went, okay, but if you don't want to play a everything that ever existed ever human list for historics, if you want to play a Roman list, then tweak it. So take these things out, add these units in. And this Uncharted Empires builds on that. So the Kingdoms of Men list is the master list for all the Kingdoms of Men in Panathor. So generic human civilizations in Panathor, they use Kingdoms of Men. The League of Rhodia, who are a faction that's like a city-state conglomerate of humans and halflings, they take the human Kingdoms of Men list and then they go tweak. So you add in halflings, you add in these, you take out other things that they don't have access to, and that gives you your theme list. Likewise, the two elf lists in this, so the the Twilight Kin and the Sylvan Kin, who are sort of wood elves, they both take the elf list from the main rulebook and then they go, well, if you want to make them more woody, here's your tree men, your dryady type creatures, your stampedes of animals that have been summoned forth from the forest to run over people's heads, werewolves, hopefully, all of that. So you have these ability to go in and theme your list to a specific style of play or a specific faction, rather than having to write a whole list specifically for it. You go, well, no, that it's so similar. All you're really doing is going, Twigletkin are regular elves who also have demons and nightmares working for them, with them, beside them, above them, who knows. So that, there's some interesting things going there. Even things like the Ratkin, because the Ratkin were very scaveny, but Mantic taking them now and building them into the actual structure of Panathor as a world and going, no, they're here, this is what they are, this is where they are from, here's the backstory behind them. And then the Ratkin slaves are subservient to the abyssal dwarves, so they are literally a slave race. So a lot of the stuff that the Ratkin either have or got gets sort of taken away because they're more or less just menial servants to the abyssal dwarves. And it'll be interesting to see what they do, because this is going to be sort of a feature that they can run going forward. Theme lists they've already got for Dead Zone and Vanguard, the skirmish games, where they can go, if you take this character, this is the style of list that you're going to build. So if you want to take a enforcer list that's more about the scouting and sniping people, you take this guy, and then it changes what's your core troops. And going forward in new supplements and new expansions, they're going to kind of do this, where they go, you take this list, and then if you want to do this, you tweak it. So dwarves are very big in Panathor, in Kings of War, because Ronnie Renton's a huge dwarf fan. So it's one of the few fantasy worlds you'll come across where dwarves, very impressed with that one, you Ben. Dwarves are not dying in Panathor. When things went wrong, dwarves shut the doors to their mountain strongholds, and then they opened them up and kicked the living tar out of all the people who were trying to survive floods and stuff, and went, all this land is ours. So dwarves are thriving. Dwarves are thriving. Dwarves are Rome for Panathor. Dwarves are the imperial nation that is kicking the living tar out of everybody. Some dwarves went, we shouldn't be doing this. So there's a theme list in this book where they're a bit more above ground. They're not involved with the imperial dwarves, and they're a bit more flexible. They've got more rangers, they've got more badger riding, berserking nutbags, because that's what we want to see in free dwarf lists. They're very much the Scottish, you can take our lives, you'll never take our freedom dwarves. And and being able to go in there and go, and this is the sort of style of it, is very interesting. So they've left themselves an awful lot of room that they can run free in.
Nice.